hello and welcome to Magnetize Your Marketing. We're going to have some fun today. We'll keep it short. It's going to be a quickie webby. We're going to kind of just dive straight in. So really quickly, I'm Christine Collins. I help intuitive, heart-centered entrepreneurs with niching in the marketing process, everything from content and copywriting to how you market and speak to your aligned niche client. I have a background in both psychology and marketing, and I'm also a certified master NLP hypnotherapist. So that is enough about me. We're going to get straight into some juicy content here. When you think about how do you know if you need help with niching, a lot of times we notice it when we're not quite sure how to write engaging copy, or it may show up as posts aren't getting engagement, or maybe the success with the conversion piece is erratic rather than consistent. Or maybe it feels like there's not a strong foundation that leads your aligned client on a journey, guiding them through your content in a way that matches her interests up with your paid offers. And that can happen sometimes when we post things that are a little bit more random, like our random thoughts, versus content that is really strategic and intuitively guided with a purpose. Having that purpose is one of the most important pieces, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. And it can also be that our content or copy maybe feels like it's boring or bland or repetitive or uninspired. So today we'll address some of those things so that you can have more success and more insight on what to say to your aligned client and how to say it, and so that you can set up your marketing process so that your writing is coming from a place of knowing instead of guessing, and so that your audience can be responding to your content and it's bringing out their interest, it's leading to sales. And also we really want it to feel easy. Sometimes it can get to be a little bit overwhelming. So we want it to feel easy, that you can just sit down and write your content because you know who you're writing to and you know what you want to say to that person. And on your client's end, it feels like you wrote it just for her. So our strategy today is to gain insight into your aligned client, into her journey, and what it looks like from her point of view. So we're going to kind of step into her shoes a little bit and understanding some key aspects of niching. So the questions that we can ask, kind of standing in her shoes to see how she's looking at the situation and the language that she might use, and customizing your marketing to your niche and to the stage of the client journey for her. So ultimately, your niche is somebody who has the desire for the outcome that you deliver. So when I talk about niching, it's to talk about it in terms of that desire and niching to that desire. Now, there's nothing wrong with looking at traits like age or location if those things happen to be relevant to your specific work. So for example, if you work with women who are in menopause, then obviously age is very important. So we're definitely not negating those characteristics, but we want to go kind of a level deeper to expand on this concept of her desire and her goals, the things that she's chasing after or that she's deeply wanting, because it can be different even across the same problem or the same topic. So to bring that to life, let's just do an example. And let's say that your niche encompasses someone who wants to experience weight release. We may have in one instance a person who every time they go to a family barbecue, there's a member in their family who's critical of them. And so they are deeply wanting to change this experience. But then we have a different person who is actually fearful about a health condition, and their anxiety spikes every time they go to the doctor. So we have two people who they both ultimately want the same result or a similar result, but it's for very different reasons. And they're having a very different life experience. And also the underlying dynamics then are different. So you can certainly support both of them. It's just that when you're speaking to them through your content and through your copy and connecting with them using your words and your understanding of their plight, it's that their plights manifest quite differently. You would either want to address them kind of in separate pieces, or you can also go and find the common theme that overlaps both experiences for both people. And there's nearly always like a surface desire, which is kind of the goal that they can articulate. And then sometimes there's a deeper desire. So using that same example, we have two people wanting the same result or outcome of weight release, but the person who's really upset going to these family events most likely has a deeper desire for things like love, acceptance, or at a minimum, the avoidance of ridicule, pain, and rejection. And on the other hand, we have the person who is anxious about going to the doctor's appointments, and that individual may have a deeper desire for things like safety, health. There may even be some fears around mortality. And so these are kind of different underlying deeper desires and different underlying lived experiences for both people. So your aligned niche client may be capable of expressing or identifying with the surface desire, but they may be a little bit unaware of that deeper level of desire, or we would say they might have a low level of insight about it. So it's not as though we all have to become like armchair therapists to unpack all this. It's really just about understanding that there are layers to desiring something. And the better the grasp that you have on the lived experience for your client, both tangibly as well as emotionally, the better you'll be able to speak to her through your content and your copy. So the basic premise of niching to desire is sitting with their experience, their lived experience, and how well do you understand where the problem actually shows up for her in her life. So for example, does it happen when she first wakes up in the morning? Because maybe it's this like immediate thing. It's a health issue. It's sensations in her body. Or is it something that appears maybe later as she gets into her day, perhaps when she sits down at her computer to do something and then she has tech issues, problems with her laptop or her website? So how does that look for her? What is that actual experience for her? How does it make her feel? Is she feeling frustrated and angry? Does she want to throw the laptop out the window? If it's related to a difficult relationship in her life, maybe she wants to throw that out the window. So how can you kind of zoom in on her life and where the absence of your help is most noticeable for her? And then how can you decide to address that in your writing to make it as specific as possible for the person that you're trying to help? So when we're niching to desire, we're basically plunging headfirst into her life experience and asking ourselves, where does the absence of you and your support show up for her in her world? And then we also want to think about the language that we use to describe this as we're writing it to her. So how would she actually describe this to a friend? That's one of my favorite ways to think about it. If she was going to sit down with a friend for coffee, like how does she talk about this? And then also, if she were to look for help online, what would she actually type in if she was to Google it? Chances are it's not going to be like the techie lingo professional terms that you as the expert think about it as, but it's going to be in her words. So let's say that she's reached a point where she's really frustrated and late one night she decides to just Google a few things online. What is she actually typing into Google? How does she type it into a search engine to look for support or help? And those are aspects that you can slowly tie into your content, doing a little bit of SEO with some keywords that can be very helpful in the matchmaking process between your work and her concerns to help her actually find you. And then asking, like, if she was out to coffee with that friend and her friend said, hey, what's up? You know, how are things going? How would she talk about this issue? What are the words that she would choose in everyday conversation? And chances are it's not going to have a lot of terminology or lingo to it. You know, sometimes like in certain realms, we may have a lot of training and education that kind of informs the way we speak about things. And with that education that we have comes terms and lingo that are really specific to our industry. So just to give you kind of a funny example, I happen to have a background in psychology and like the therapy and counseling realms. Because of that, I have a lot of friends that are therapists and psychologists in that sort of counseling area. And when you get a bunch of them together, inevitably you might hear things like, oh, she's so borderline, or this one is totally histrionic, or codependent get thrown around a little bit. The thing is that your niched aligned client is most likely not waking up in the morning going, oh my gosh, I'm so codependent. What on earth am I going to do? No, they're probably walking around thinking about the argument that they had with their partner and what a doofus he or she was. And maybe they're chatting to a friend about, like, this is what happened and this is what he said or she said. And then this is what I did. And the same is true, of course, in the more technical realms as well. So another funny example, my husband works in the tech industry, and sometimes he'll come along and he's talking about how, like, a team didn't complete their sprint or failed to follow such and such methodology. And I kind of just look at him and I'm like, so basically they didn't do their work? Is that what you're saying? So we kind of need to boil things down to understandable ways of communicating with her. And then we also want to ask, what level of insight does this person actually have into the problem? Has she already tried solutions on her own? Like, is this brand new for her? How long has she been dealing with it? What is her level of education and understanding about this issue? And that is when we can start to get into understanding the stages of her individual journey, both with that issue as well as your specific work with that issue. So when we talk about the client's journey, there's a process that every single person in your audience will go through. Some of them will go through it very quickly. Some of them, it may take a lot longer. And part of that has to do with how that person is uniquely wired. And part of it has to do with kind of where they are in their own journey with that problem or issue. But in general, you'll have some people who will see your work one time and just know this is what they need. This is the direction they're going to move in. But quite a bit larger of the percentage of people is going to need to have repeated exposure to your work, to your content and your offers over a period of time, perhaps months. And in some cases, it may be even like a couple of years before they reach the point of being ready to make a change and to work with you. And again, that just has to do with their wiring and their unique journey and their awareness of the issue. Your content helps to bring them through a process of education and increasing their insight and their awareness of the issues and how the issue works for them. So the three phases that we talk about here are the attraction phase, which is the very early stage or kind of low level of awareness or insight, where she doesn't yet have a lot of education about the issue, about understanding of it. And then gradually, often through your content, helping to educate her, to kind of explain things to her and show her new things, she begins to step into what I call the moving towards phase, where she's warming up and she's increasing her insight into the problem and into the solution. And then finally, she gets to a place that I've called the imagining phase, or the readiness phase, it sometimes is termed, where she now has a high level of insight, a high level of understanding. That is often thanks to your content, warming her up, educating her, and leading her towards that greater level of understanding. So when she's in the attraction phase, a lot of times in the marketing world, this is called a cold audience. And it's like a not yet ready audience. And I kind of like to look at these as levels of insight or levels of awareness. So this is someone who either has not yet had a lot of exposure to information around the topic, or they've not had a lot of opportunity to self-reflect on that topic. So her readiness is low, her insight is low, and she's just becoming aware of this issue. It could also be that it's a relatively new problem for her. It's just appeared for her in her life. It also may not seem as critical or important to her yet. It kind of hasn't hit that threshold for her yet. So some of the questions that we could ask ourselves if she's just becoming aware of this issue, let's say yesterday, what are some things that she might be thinking about? What are some of the things that she might be feeling? And this is obviously going to be very different from someone who's been exploring this issue for a long period of time. So if she's just in this early phase, let's say yesterday she woke up and she noticed it, or she saw some of your content yesterday, maybe for the first time. How does she define the problem and how does she talk about it? And so we can look at what she's thinking about and what she's feeling in particular. As we talked about, we might want to look at the language that she uses to describe the issue. But now we can be more specific to where she is in that client journey. So in this stage, she'll still be talking about the problem and the issue in everyday terms. And it's really worth noting that in any phase is that your client doesn't think about their life and their problems in the same way that you do. She doesn't know that she has a niching issue, insert LOL, or a content engagement issue. She just knows that she's not getting a bunch of little red dots dinging in her notifications for someone commenting. So what is the equivalent for your niche aligned client? Like, how does this show up for her? And what is she actually experiencing? And how does she think about it? And then a little bit further down the track, she gains insight. She slowly starts to gain awareness. Education is happening both from you, perhaps your content, and perhaps from other sources. And she may slowly begin to describe it and think about it differently. So maybe she picks up a term or two, maybe a little bit of lingo, but more importantly, she's in the moving towards phase where she is now beginning to actively read your content. She's reading it on purpose now versus like it just happened to show up as she's scrolling. Now she actually stops and makes sure that she has a look at what you've got to say. And she's beginning to move towards your work and towards that insight that we're talking about, where she's becoming that quote unquote warmer audience. So I would say that she's gaining an awareness. And we can take a look now at how does the problem look and feel different to her? What's different about this compared to where she was in the attraction phase? And so you can think about like where these differences, the cold, warm, and hotter audiences, where they might show up. Often your coldest audience will be in the more public places. So perhaps like your social media page, like if you have a public Facebook page or Instagram, the places where she's likely to stumble across you, maybe on your website where your blogs live. If she's Googling things and she stumbles across one of your blogs, and then as she begins to move towards you, she moves towards a deeper insight. Maybe she gets on your email list. So it's possible now that maybe you would want your newsletters to have a little bit of a different tilt towards them versus what you're putting out on your social media page. You know, sometimes we see like people will write something and it's like, okay, I wrote this and I'm going to plop it here on my Facebook page and I'm going to plop it here into 5 different groups on the same day. And then I'm going to plop it here into my email newsletter and then put it here on my blog. And it's certainly easy to understand why people would do that because it feels like a time saver. It feels less overwhelming. It seems like it's easier. But for the audience, it's kind of like she's not being spoken to at her level or being met where she is based on where she is in the client journey. So we have someone in this moving towards phase, and it's helpful to think about how does the problem look and feel to her now that she has that increasing insight, a little bit more education, and what does it look like for her now? How does she talk about that problem now? And is it different from when she was in that early attraction phase? And as she gets towards the imagining or the readiness phase, this would be considered your hottest audience. That's often what it's called. And I would look at it and say, this is someone who has a high level of insight and a higher level of awareness and a higher level of readiness because she's been educated about the problem. She has more insight thanks to you, your content, your education. And maybe over a period of time, you've helped to guide her and provide some revelations for her that have taken her from where she was, where she didn't understand it very well at all, to where she now has a lot more insight. So she's gone from not even understanding why she needs to have website maintenance, for example, to now she knows what can go wrong if she doesn't have that support and why it's so important. And she has this increased education about it. And so she's at a place of readiness where maybe she's been following you along for a while. And so over the course of that time, a few things have happened for her to get her to this stage. Number one, she understands that you are an expert in your subject matter to the extent that you need to be, right? You don't have to know everything, but she has seen that you know your stuff. And she has seen you demonstrate your own insight And over time, her impression of you being well-versed in your topic has been formed. And number two, she has a level of trust in you as a practitioner or a provider because you have displayed consistency with your business. And over a span of time, weeks, days, or months, she has seen you consistently showing up to talk about the same issues, demonstrating your knowledge and your willingness to be helpful, teaching her things that she didn't know before. And you have really also shown that your business is reliably present, which builds trust as well. And that's one of the many reasons why I like to talk about consistency. Sometimes it's like the dirty little C word that nobody wants to think about because it's not fun or it feels like it could be hard. But it's really nothing more than consistently showing up with your niche message, consistently building that long-term relationship with her and that trust with your content and the work that you're putting out there. So it's like adding to the trustworthiness and the confidence that she has in you and in your business. And then you can release any worries about being repetitive, saying the same message. You're kind of like the light in the window for this soul who's searching. And not everybody sees everything that you put out there anyway. And like we said earlier, there are some people who will go through this client journey very quickly, where they might follow you for like a day or two, and they're just ready to work with you. It doesn't have to take weeks and months. It could take 24 hours, where I've sometimes like stumbled into a YouTube rabbit hole for somebody and watched every video and got really excited about their work. So it really just depends on that individual and where they are, with the issue in their life. It can take a little bit longer though as well. So there are some people who they need to see something multiple times. And it may be that the first time they see your work, they're like, I don't really think that's for me. I don't really think I need that. And then maybe they see it again and it lands a little bit deeper that time. Maybe they see some educational material. And over time, they slowly increase their insight and their awareness. And it really just depends on that individual's unique journey. Maybe eventually they sign up to your newsletter and they don't even open every email, but they have a higher awareness of that material that you're sharing with them. And so the point is, we can't fully predict what the client journey is like for every person because there are so many variables. It's definitely not a linear path here. And we don't know, where they're coming onto the path and where they are with the issue in their life. And so we want to have our content be capable of encompassing them wherever they are in that journey. And us having this understanding of the journey helps you to inform the way that you're writing about it. So when she reaches this imagining stage, she's ready. She's begun to visualize some amount of improvement that could be possible for her as a result of working with you. And that's why I like the word imagining, because she's starting to imagine how life could be and what is possible. She's begun to visualize, maybe even fantasize a little bit about what's possible for her. And she may also be imagining what it's like to be your client, to receive the support and the outcomes that you offer. And because of that, this is a stage where it can be particularly powerful for her to experience things like tasters, freebies, live streams, free sessions, opt-ins, things that make her feel like she is your client. She's having that little taste of that support from you. And so in this phase, we can kind of assess how what she believes and what she knows and how she talks about the issue is maybe changing. So does she speak about it differently when she talks to her friend? And now maybe she's saying, I've heard about this term codependent, and I'm starting to wonder if maybe I'm not part of the problem too. Ha ha ha. So in most cases, when you're talking to a combined audience of warm and cold, generally speaking, you want to err towards the side of using that more basic everyday language. But when you're talking to your audience with high insight or high awareness, you can kind of up-level your conversation a little bit. It's kind of like you're talking to them in a way that they know that they know. And maybe it's reserved for like people in your group program or, kind of like that insider conversation for people who have that higher level of insight and awareness. So let's get some tangible application for what we've talked about today. Really clear, specific things to do to make your content and copy more engaging. And the first one is to be very tangible with your descriptors. When you're writing your copy, the more you can use clear, tangible, real world depictions, the more likely she is to sit up and take notice. And we've already talked through a few examples about like some exact situations where she might find herself in going to a family barbecue, having this doctor's appointment. If you do something more tech related, maybe it's she's sitting down to update her new pricing on her website and she can't figure out how do you do this in WordPress, but you know how to do that. So you can walk her through that lived experience. And if you can make it really tangible for her, she's going to feel like you're talking about her life, like she's there. It doesn't have to be the exact scene. She can feel that. She can be like, oh yeah, that's really close to how I've experienced this. So you're writing this experience into your copy. So it's like, you walk in, you sit down at your desk, you turn the computer on, you're so excited to get your pricing updated. And it's taken you so long to get to this point. You've overcome these mindset wobbles about raising your prices. And now you're really excited to update your pricing. So you log into WordPress, but ... boom, something happens. She doesn't know what to do. Something goes wrong. She can't figure it out. And now it's like all of her excitement, over this dumb tech thing is stopping her from this enormously exciting moment. And now instead of excited and thrilled, she's feeling frustrated and she wants to throw her computer across the room. So if you can describe that experience for her, she's going to sit up and take notice because she's deeply engaged in the story because it's her story. You're telling her her lived experience, and that's immensely powerful for her. And the more that you can use those real life examples that are very powerful descriptors, the more engaging your content and your copy is going to be. And another piece here in the application is being strategic. So making sure that the content that you're using when you're sharing in your blogs or your social media, that it's a match to whatever your current offers are. So that way, if someone is following you on socials or they're in your list, the work that they're seeing, it's relevant to something you're actually offering right now that's available to them. So you're not kind of setting them up to maybe be confused or even disappointed because they watched a fantastic video for a half an hour about a subject and then they go to your website to try to work with you. And the thing that's there that you're selling, it's completely not related at all to the thing that they got excited about. So kind of making sure that there's a strategy to what you're sharing when, that it matches with the content. So your genius tips and your educational things actually layer and match what she has access to in terms of getting help from you. So you can kind of schedule your content to match whatever you're currently promoting. I like to think of it, because I love analogies, I like to think of it as sorting a deck of cards into their respective suits. So, like hearts, diamonds, clubs, and I'll say, okay, the hearts category is going to be like this XYZ program. So we start with that. And then we'll say this tip goes into the hearts category because hearts represents that program. And then I've also got this freebie that's a great lead in to that particular program because it gives a taste of some of the same types of work that we do in that program. So that's also in the hearts category. And then decide, okay, February is Hearts Month. And so I can just pull that stack of Hearts cards from the deck. And I've got my tips, my freebies, and my paid promo, and they all match. And then you can consider, just like with the phases of the journey, where the most appropriate content goes for each phase. So where are your colder stage people showing up? And it could be different depending on your unique business, but maybe that's your Facebook page. And maybe your hottest audience is in a Facebook group, or maybe that's your email list. Most likely, if they have signed up to be on your list, they are a warmer audience. They've already given you their email address, so they're interested, at least at some level, in your work. So as you're releasing your content, how are you taking them and guiding them from warmer to hotter or colder to warmer? And how does your content and your tips and your education kind of help them to up-level their insight into that issue to increase their awareness? And then, of course, always make sure you've told them how to work with you in a way that's really easy for them to access you, to book in with you. I've actually been on websites where I had to literally scroll through like 800 different things, like scroll, just to find the link to pay to book in. So I don't think, I think sometimes we worry about like being too spammy or like too sales forward. But if you're a heart-centered entrepreneur, you have most likely already made a Herculean effort to avoid coming across as spammy. So I would say don't let your downfall be that they can't easily figure out how to book in. Make that process as easy as possible for them. So here I have for you a little checklist. These are just some key suggestions for things that we've talked over today. It's kind of like a summary of everything that I recommend for having really engaging niche content and marketing. So you can, if you want to, you can use this as a checklist against like a specific piece of content or a specific piece of copy if you want to. But consider your aligned client and her lived experience. So how can you tangibly capture that experience and speak to her desire? Having content and copy for each stage of the client journey, cold, warm, hot, everywhere from attraction to the imagining phase, and using her language, understanding the way that she's describing it, writing it in everyday terms that she can understand, that she would say to a friend, so that when she's scrolling and she sees the headline you've created, she's like, oh, I got to stop. This is for me. And she immediately can relate to it. We really only have about 20 seconds from a neuroscience perspective to capture attention. So if it's a post, it's got to happen in the first couple of lines to make it relevant for her. Same thing if it's a video, it has to happen in those first 20 seconds where she can immediately relate to and connect to what you're talking about. And we want to use her language, her search terms, and that's where that SEO piece comes in that we talked through. And we can attune to differences in buyer styles and personas. So we touched on this just a little bit today, where we talked about how there's some people that are going to see your content once and they'll be ready. And then there are plenty more people, though, that are going to need a relationship with your work over an extended period before they're ready to buy from you. And it's also important that you take care of your own mindset in this process so that you don't feel overwhelmed, so that the marketing work that you're doing feels sustainable for you, that it can actually be maintained over the life of your business versus it kind of comes and goes or it flickers out due to overwhelm. So I pulled this list together as an overview of some of the key facets to really engaging and effective marketing for you to be able to consistently attract your aligned clients. So if you are interested in more support, then you might be interested in my signature program, Magic in Creation, where we go a little bit more deeply into magnetizing your marketing in ways to attract your aligned client. We get to kind of that core of niche writing to make your copywriting easier, to make it more effective. And then we can also get into some of the fun bits around your client psyche and the niching traits and desires and the challenges for your specific niche. And we look at using language that is inclusive and engaging for your niche so that you can design your content for each stage of the client journey. And then we also have a look at common marketing mistakes that are really easy to fix once you know about them. Sometimes I'll see a marketing process that's set up for only one type of buyer style, only one type of neuroscience style, and absolutely eliminates everybody else. And as a result, there may be people who otherwise would have been interested, like the work resonated for them, but they can't commit because there's a lack of information or it's the way that it's set up. And I think that's really a shame because the actual product or service may have otherwise been a great fit for them. So I'd like to help you with those things so that you can ensure your marketing is inclusive and that you don't miss out on aligned clients. And also we can ensure that you have sustainable marketing that feels easy for you, that can be consistent without kind of losing your mind trying to keep it up. And then there's also, of course, a layer of mindset support because I'm a certified hypnotherapist, certified EFT practitioner. And I know that mindset wobbles and rabbit holes can really inhibit your marketing success. So in Magic in Creation, we also use EFT, hypnosis, and NLP tools to support you. You are the powerful creator in your business. So you need to have that level of support as you're supporting others. You get a downloadable hypnosis audio, and that was designed for magic and creation students to kind of pair with the course. So this is my signature niching program, and it can help you to get more engagement, more excitement around your marketing. And I will say, just objectively, I think it's got some really juicy little gems in there. I've poured everything I know about content marketing, intuitive strategy, and kind of tied it all together so that you can have more successful marketing, and you get that magical mix of the strategy that's very practical, the intuition that has a magical touch to it, and the mindset support so that you can really have everything you need to attract your clients. And it's been broken down into bite-sized sections, so it feels pretty easy to breeze through it. The full price, it's $197, but we have early birdie going on where it's only $147 all the way until May 22nd. So there's no pressurized rush. I want you to have time to take advantage of this price if it's of interest to you. And of course, if you have questions about that, feel free to get in touch with me. I am more than happy to answer them for you. And I just want to close today by saying how much I appreciate you coming along for today's journey. It's been fun for me, but I hope that you've really gained some valuable insight that you can immediately put into play. And whether or not our adventure together continues beyond today, I have really enjoyed sharing this time with you.